Well, good morning. I don't know, you guys are good. Sorry. I know I start rambling sometimes and it throws off. I don't know if you've realized this or not about life, but sometimes life is hard. Anyone else? Yes. Anyone else? Life is a little bit, we could even say it's unpredictable, right? Which sometimes creates the frustration and creates the hardship that we put on our lives, right? Like when you got married, you knew it was going to be tough, right? Or at least I hope you did, because if you didn't, you're in for a rude awakening. You knew it was going to be tough, but you weren't expecting to navigate some of the valleys that you have navigated in your life. You weren't expecting your marriage to be on the rocks like it is, or the valleys of infertility, or the word divorce at the dinner table. That's the only way we can resolve this, is if we get divorced. Those are the valleys. Some of you, as you've gotten older, you thought you'd be married by now, but yet you still sit and you're waiting. God, where are you? Where is my spouse? Where is my husband? Where is my wife? You knew death was certain in life, but you weren't expecting to see your loved one's body consumed by cancer, or holding your dead baby in your hands and in your arms. You thought by now that the same sin struggle that you've been struggling with would have passed by now. Surely it would have passed by now. You thought that your love for God would be so much deeper than it would be. But the sin struggle keeps creeping back in. And you find yourself still loving the things of this world way more than you love your Heavenly Father. Things are going on personally in your life, and you're seeing the injustice in this world, and you're screaming at the top of your lungs, as it feels as if you and others are headed straight for a cliff, and no one is listening. Not even God is listening. The Lord is not moving, as it feels like you're inching closer and closer to the cliff. And when these things begin to happen, we tend to question God and wonder, God, what in the world is going on right now? Have you ever said that? Probably even this week you've said that. God, why do you allow bad things to happen? That's a pretty good one that I think most of us ask. God, why aren't you helping me defeat this sin? Why do I always rely on this sin to bring me comfort when I know I should be chasing after you? Why do I still have to deal with this struggle? What did I do that I deserve this hardship in my life? What did I do to you? Listen, every time we turn on the news or notification pops up on your phone, we hear some horrible tragedy. And we could spend some time even talking about those, but in the next 6 months, those tragedies are going to be gone because we have a whole new group over here. And I find myself asking often, how long? How long? And we see the same question in Psalms 13. David asks it 4 different times. Have you found yourself in this spot? How long? Where are you? How long do I have to be single? How long do I have to deal with these emotions flooding back of the divorce or the separation? How long do I have to sit through radiation? How long will I be tempted by this same sin? When will I finally pass the test and not struggle anymore? How long? And these questions to God aren't a bad thing, right? It communicates a deep human understanding about the character and activity of God, and then also his effect in our life as we're crying out to him. Specifically today, as we look in Psalms 13, we will see questions in the midst of despair. And after David gets all that despair out, we see his despair turn into trust. We see the heavy sighing that he's going through, the heavy weight, the heavy burden, all of a sudden turns into this heavenly singing and praising of the Lord. So let's read Psalm 13. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my own soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemies say, I have prevailed over him. Lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. Verse 5. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. So at some level, if you know Jesus, his grace has allowed you to see that this life is not all that this life was meant to be. I think we can all agree with that, right? Not only do you see the effects of sin externally, but you can also see it in yourself as well. You should always be longing and crying out to the Lord. How long, Jesus, till I get to see you? How long till I get to take off this body, off this tent, and be in your presence forever and ever? How long till I enter a world where there is no more sin, where there is no more death? And as we look at this psalm, there's a couple of observations that we can make. The first one is this, is that pain in life is a very real thing. And it can last a very long time. Pain in this life is a real thing and it can last a long time. And the second thing is that pain in life will always drive us towards something. The pain of this world will always drive us to something. Once we understand these two things, it causes us to see pain in a little different light. Verse 1, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? The pain in David's heart comes from this sense that God has forgotten all about David. He's forgotten all about him. And that the Lord has actually created some distance between him and David. And no doubt that David was faced with worse circumstances, and he bravely overcame all of those because he sensed that the Lord's presence was with him. And yet, all of a sudden, he's feeling very distant from the Lord. And it doesn't take much for David to recognize this is going to lead to my despair. And we know, at least scripturally, we might not believe it sometimes, but we know that God did not forget David in this moment. Sometimes it's hard for us to believe that the Lord hasn't forgotten about us. But the truth is, he hasn't. But we feel like it. We feel like the Lord has forgotten about us, that we're out in left field, we're out in a desert all by ourselves. David feels like it too. And when we have such strong feelings, the feelings begin to create a reality. Catch that. Our feelings will begin to create a reality. It's not the true reality. It's a reality that our feelings are creating. And David felt that God had forgotten him and felt that God was hiding. So in a sense, this is true for David, right? But it's true according to his feelings, not according to the scriptures, not according to the promises of the Lord. There's a little bit of give and take, and this is a tough balancing act when it comes to our feelings. Some people completely ignore feelings and think that feelings should have nothing to do with our relationship with the Lord. Feelings should have nothing to do with anything on the planet. Throw them all out. That's irrational. Feelings go over here, and keep your emotions and your feelings on this side. And it's an extreme viewpoint of God because the Lord has given us emotions. He's given us feelings, and it says that we were created in his image. So that means when we feel anger or feel love, we feel care, sorrow, and all the other feelings, that God must feel those feelings as well. Feelings are a gift from God and a sign that we are made in his image. And then on the other side, some live their lives ruled by feelings. They believe whatever reality that their feelings are painting for them. The problem with that is that we have these feelings and we were made in the image of God, but our feelings also reflect the fallenness of man. So we can't fully trust all our feelings because of this. It was all right for David to feel everything that he was feeling in this moment. And David also was correct in taking it straight to the Lord and getting it out. But we should never accept the reality that our feelings are painted within our life. David is crying out to God, and he feels as if God is playing this eternal game of hide and seek. Lord, I am praying, I am calling out to you, I am seeking you earnestly, and you are nowhere to be found. I have a 6-year-old daughter named Olivia, and something that's super fun about Liv is that her vocabulary is crazy, and she has better words than I do, and shares a lot more details than I do. And so whenever she's painting this story of her school day, or while I'm here at work and she's at home and she's painting this beautiful picture of how her day went, some of you guys have probably even experienced her sharing her day with you. She uses a ton of words and a ton of details. And sometimes, if I'm being honest, as I've confessed many times, I've won Father of the Year award multiple times, and I typically follow it up with a failure. So here's one of my failures as a dad. I will be listening, kind of, and then I start realizing, hey, I remember in the beginning of the story, this was the plot, right? So why are we all the way over here with all these random details? These details don't affect this over here, right? Any other parents in the room? Thank you. And so what happens is, because sometimes I'm selfish and the details don't make sense, I tend to doze off. Right? Not literally go to sleep, but I start daydreaming, or I start thinking about, maybe I should call, or maybe I should send a text, or maybe it would just be great if you went outside and played, so that way I didn't have to listen to the story. Come on, parents. And a couple of times Liv has even said, hey, Dad, are you listening? Because she knows when I'm daydreaming now. She can see it on my face. She knows that I'm not engaged with her in the conversation. Dad, are you paying attention? Repeat back to me what I just said, Dad. Can I tell you that David is doing the same thing to God right here? Lord, are you listening to me? Are you even paying attention? I'm sharing my heart with you. And it feels like you're not even engaged. You're not even listening. You're not even looking at me. I'm sharing all these details. I'm going through some heavy stuff, Lord. And you're nowhere to be found. In fact, I feel like you've forgotten all about me. And it doesn't even end there. In verse 2, it says, how long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? You see, David had been wrestling both internally and externally, and when David began to think that God is not there, he turned to himself and realized there's really not much inside of me that can encourage me. Because he comes face to face with his own wickedness and his own selfish desires of his heart. And if God's word says that the heart is wicked or deceitful above all else in Jeremiah 17, who can trust the heart then? Why are we looking internally anyways? Why would I turn to myself? That's what David realizes. We've been here, right? We've been here. When we're going through troubles or loss, pain, suffering, we tend to go to what's going to bring us peace, what's going to bring us comfort, or at least what's going to numb the pain for a season. We try to figure out how we can ignore it and go back. But then the pain and the suffering keeps coming back because someone uses that word and it brings back all the emotions. Or you walk into that room again and it brings back all the emotions from the event. It triggers everything back up. And pain has a center of gravity as well. A new instance of pain suddenly calls up from all of those past hurts. whether they're related or not. Isn't it funny how our brain remembers things that we wish it ought not to? We go to sleep, only to be face to face with dreams or nightmares that wake us up right back into that false reality, or that reality that we're trying to escape. And we try to bring ourselves counsel and comfort only to realize that our hearts are even more broken than that reality, that we are heavy with sorrow. How long, David asks? How long do I have to keep doing this? And we see this internal struggle, but then we see when he looks outward, he faces other issues as well, because that was all internal struggle. His external was all his enemies. Let's remember that David was a king, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that some people wanted David's seat, that some people wanted to sit on his throne, that David had a couple of haters, right? And what's interesting to me is that this psalm, the enemy, the word, could be used for those haters coming for his throne, or it could be death itself. It could be the evil in this world. What we know is that he has a consistent issue, and he is in the midst of some real pain and heartache right now. He's tired, and he's ready for a new chapter. And he's ready for God to show himself and to breathe fresh life into David. He's wrecked in some of the most intimate areas of his heart and mind by an apparent feeling of God's lack of concern in his life. Have you been there? Maybe some of you are there right now. You're in a season of hurt. And in that, you're asking God, how long do I have to deal with this? And you give space. You make room for the Lord to speak and to minister to you, and all you get is silence in return. Which leads to more and more questions that you're throwing at the Lord. This feeling of pain and abandonment is very real. And I have a hard time sometimes when Christians try to seem like once you know Jesus, life gets all better. You just need Jesus in your life, and he's going to make everything better. You don't have to be a Christian for very long to realize that's not exactly true. That's not exactly true. There's not a flip of the switch, something magical happens, and then the world is restored for you. While we exist on this planet, that's just never going to be the case. In this world, we will have pain, we will have heartache. We will see our loved ones die. We'll see others and ourselves struggle with sin over and over again. We will be betrayed. We will see war. We will walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We will until the day that we come face to face with Jesus. We'll see the effects of sin until that moment. And this really shouldn't be a surprise because Jesus told him himself in John 16, you will have trouble. You will have trouble. That's super encouraging, right? And a lot of us, we just read that and we're like, well, that passage is probably too big, so let's skip that whole entire paragraph and let's just move on to something else. Hey, I've done it. Hooray, I get to have trouble today. Hooray, count it all joy. We've been there. We've been there. But can I tell you, you will have trouble. The rest of the scripture says, but take heart because I have overcome the world. But take heart because I have overcome the world. The world is filled with sin, pain, and heartache, and Jesus said that he has overcome it. Listen to me, you may be crying out to God, and he may seem silent, but it doesn't mean that the Lord doesn't care about you or doesn't care about the situation. He does care, and he wants you to continue to pursue him. Continue to seek the Lord's face. Verse 3. Consider and answer me, O Lord, my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemies say, I have prevailed over him. lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. When you are in the midst of pain, where do you go? I mentioned this earlier, but often we allow our pain to push us to pleasures that's going to bring us peace and comfort, or at least numb the pain. We enjoy the gifts rather than the gift giver. We find counsel in our friends or that streaming platform instead of diving first into the Word of God and allowing it to push us into prayer and seeking the Lord's face. David shows us that in the midst of the pain, there's something that he's driven to is the Lord. And he does it with prayer. To press into him means that we must vocalize our experience openly and honestly about our pain and our brokenness and the abandonment, and ask him to do something about it specifically. What would it look like for us to pray to God in this way? David begs God to look, to answer, to light up my eyes. Lord, do these things. He then follows it up with, if you don't do these things, I very well may die. One commentary says that in this moment here, this prayer of desperation that if God doesn't move in this situation, David is experiencing his fear and he might waver in his faith and lose confidence in the Lord. That's a big deal. I think some of us have also threw out those comments or those fleeces to the Lord as well. God, if you don't move, surely you're not real, and I'm out of here. So for that reason, God, listen to David. For that reason, God, it is so vital that you move right now. I know you are real. Please come to life. Hear me again. Don't play hide and seek anymore. He's pleading with God. He feels like God is hiding his face from him. And this is his response. How long are you going to turn away from me? God, how long are you going to turn away from me? Because I'm going to need you to look at me now. Not only look at me, but I need you to answer me. And not only do I need you to answer me, you need to answer so that my inner spiritual condition can be shown in an outward appearance. Revive me on the inside, Lord. So how I experience your grace, others can see it. God, I need to feel your presence again. And sometimes, if we're honest, we see this and, man, I don't know if I can pray like that. That seems disrespectful, not honoring. I don't think I can pray like that. Can I tell you that I have a hard time thinking that we shouldn't pray like this? I don't think it's disrespectful. I think this is what a real relationship looks like sometimes. If you've had a friend in your life, you've probably had some words with them. If you're married, I guarantee you've had words with them. Just ask my wife. We've had tough conversations. We had one on Tuesday. It did not go well. Listen, God created the heavens and the earth. Just think about that for 5 seconds, that he created the heavens and the earth. How small do you think he is if he can't handle your open and honest questions? Even in the midst of his trial, David still somehow fights to pray and to cry out to the Lord. And if we're honest, for some of us, that's not truly our first response. We complain, we get angry, we retreat, And by retreat, I mean we completely disengage from everything. We do the bare minimum, and then the rest of the time we live our life in isolation. What would it look like for us, instead of complaining aimlessly, that we would at least draw up our complaints and send them to the Lord? What would it look like for us is that whenever we were angry and we're struggling, that we were open and honest with the Lord. Hey, this is what's frustrating me, and I'm sick and tired of dealing with it. So if you could hurry up and show up, that would be great. Some of you guys might need to pray that prayer. I've prayed it a lot. Or when you're in turmoil, what do you run to? Are you running to find the Lord and to rest in Him, for a new revelation, for a fresh breath in Him? Or do you run away from Him, seeking the pleasures of this earth? I heard this great prayer, quote, statement. And I've wrestled with it for a while, because I think for some of us, we want to check the box. So in our daily rhythm, we wake up at 8:15 and we read our Bible plan, and then we pray about our Bible plan, and we go about our day, and then at the end of the night, we're praying as well, so we're always checking the box. Sometimes the heart is missing. And so listen to the statement. The secret to a consistent prayer life isn't discipline. It's not waking up early and praying and reading the Word and then praying. Listen to what the speaker said. He said it's desperation. The secret to a consistent prayer life isn't discipline. It's desperation. And I've wrestled with that for a couple of years now, because I want to say that it is discipline. And there's an element of truth to that. But if there is no desperation behind it to your prayer life, potentially you're lacking something in your prayer life. And this is what we see in David here. Be honest with where you are. Be honest with the Lord. David told God that if he didn't intervene, death was surely around the corner for him. And Peter tells us to cast our anxieties on the Lord. What's great is right before, he gives us the permission to go ahead and do that. He tells us to humble ourselves under the almighty hand of God. If we want him to move, we have to be honest about where we are with our life, what season we're going through. I truly believe that the Lord wants that. He knows, but he wants us to be able to articulate it and communicate it to him. He wants us to be honest with him. And the cool part is he already knows that. So why not be honest with him? I'll say it a different way. David writes this in the midst of so much pain. We could say that he's on the edge of the cliff, right? With all the feelings of abandonment, he somehow finds his position in between verse 4 and verse 5, singing praises to the Lord. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. When he looks at himself and at his situation, he pauses to remember his God. When you see pain both externally and internally, when you come face to face with it in a very real way, there are a couple of things that I think begin to happen when we're truly seeking the Lord and his steadfast love. The first one is this: God's love is never changing. That's why David can go back to this. Steadfast love. I have trusted in your steadfast love. And when we see the word steadfast love here, we've talked about it before, it's a sod. This is God's covenantal love for his people. And David uses this word, I believe, with a purpose, because it's reminding God of the covenant that he made to David in 2 Samuel, where God makes the covenant with David and promises him that an offspring from his house will be forever king and forever on the throne. I believe he specifically uses that word. You know how sometimes we remind God, hey God, do you remember the promises? It would be great if I could cash in on one of those promises right now. I think this is David's position right now. Your steadfast love, I remember all the good things here, and I'm still believing. Even though I don't see it, I still believe that you are the same as you were back then as you are today. God chooses to enter into his covenant, not based on Israel's character, right? Not based on our character. It's not even based on David's character. It's based entirely on the Lord's character. God made a promise to faithfully commit to and faithfully fulfill his promises. He chooses to continue to uphold this covenant, even when the people on the other end choose not to uphold theirs. Steadfast love. This is what David trusted in, which led him to remember something else about God, that God's salvation is true, that the Lord's salvation is true. Because David understands the ground of the covenant that is entirely upheld by God, David knew that this salvation was going to be completely secure. And what I find so interesting about this rejoicing in God's salvation is he's in the middle of his mess. The Lord still feels far from David. The external pressures of people trying to fight him and take his throne are still there. The situation hasn't changed, however, not for a second of his suffering was worthless. I was at Rawhide this morning, and I try and go on Sunday mornings to Rawhide, pray through the message and read through it. And I overheard these two gals talking at one of the high top tables. Thank you. You can tell I'm outside of my notes now. And as I'm reading through it, I remember this gal saying, see, that's why I could never do the religion thing. Because of what you're going through right now. And you walk out the religious thing perfectly, was the gal's words. So how can you serve a God that would allow that to happen? Isn't it funny that I heard this conversation today? And the lady, without missing a beat, says this, my suffering is not worthless. I get to use my suffering today to tell you about my God. And I can tell you that I had tears in my eyes because I don't know if I could have responded in that way. But you could tell that that gal knew that the Lord was working. Some of us would say the Lord wasn't working in her life with whatever was going on. But man, did the Lord create a divine moment for that gal to meet Jesus, to experience God. Romans chapter 8 speaks to this. We groan, we hurt, but in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption, to obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. This freedom can only come from God, who is concerned about your good and his glory. And for that reason, salvation is surely coming. David knows that God's salvation is a sure thing, is a true thing, because he has seen the goodness of the Lord before in his life. Which leads me to the last thing. God's goodness knows no limits. God's goodness knows no limits. Depending on what version of the Bible you have, verse 6 will either say, because you have dealt bountifully with me, or because he has been good to me. Because he is good to me. David realized that everything he goes through is simply par for the course, if you say. What else should I expect in a fallen world? Of course, there's going to be pain and heartache. There's going to be brokenness, of course. Sin, I'm always going to be wrestling with sin. The people around me are going to be wrestling with sin. However, even with that, the grace that is given to him in the midst of all that pain is something that he doesn't truly deserve at all. God's goodness in his life knows no limits. And so it is with us. God deals bountifully with us as well. Because I know that you guys have seen in your own personal walk where the Lord has been good to you and kind to you, where he's been faithful to you. And sometimes it's easy for us just to see the pain on the outside, and we often forget what's actually going on in the inside. Much of the pain that we see is because of sin. My sin, your sin, the world's sin. We live in this fallen, sinful world. We're going to experience pain. We're going to experience trouble. And we're going to see brokenness, but in that, God has dealt bountifully with me. The Lord has been gracious to me. He has been good to me. He has been kind to me. Hear me when I say this. Placing our faith in Jesus may not change your current circumstance. You might not stand on the edge of the cliff longer than you were anticipating. You might have to stand out there a little bit longer. But because of our faith, it allows us to see that the ultimate pain that we could ever experience, the full wrath of God, will never truly experience that. Because of Jesus. Jesus is our hope that this pain that we experience right now on earth is the closest thing to hell that we will ever experience, that we will ever feel, that we will ever see. And in light of eternity, it's really just a vapor. It's a twinkling of an eye. It's a very short time. So as you ask this question, how long? How long, God? How long? Can I tell you today? Not long at all. Because the same God who started a work in you has promised that he is going to finish it, that he is going to complete it. Worship team, if you guys can go ahead and come on up. David determined to believe this in his life. Even in the midst of all of his mess. So the challenge is can we commit to do the same thing that we see David walk out? In Psalm 13, it opens up with David just confessing where he's at with the Lord. Hey, we're in this crazy cat and mouse game, in this crazy hide and seek game. I can't see you. I can't find you. You're not listening. I'm done with this game. I'm no longer going to play this game because surely you have left me and you have abandoned me, which that means it's going to lead to my death because I can no longer follow you. Oh, but you are good and I have trusted in your steadfast love. Can you tell the Lord where you're at? Can you be honest with the Lord? So you can experience his presence again. So you can hear his voice again, that he comes alive in you again. Listen, the goal is not to ignore the pain. The pain is there, and that's just the reality. It may go away, it may not. But when you're honest with the Lord and where we are, when we respond with, Lord, your steadfast love, the Lord will minister to your heart. Lord, minister to your situation and to your mind. So take this opportunity to pray, to tell the Lord exactly where you are. Allow that heavy sighing to turn into praise. Let's go ahead and stand and cry out to the Lord together.